Avatar: The Way of Water was one of the most visually stunning movies of all time, setting a new standard for film visual effects. We're gonna look at 10 other movies that have achieved a similar level of visual effects awesomeness. 2016 The Jungle Book was a remarkable achievement in the visual effects industry. The film was primarily shot on a soundstage, but the environment and the animal characters were created entirely digitally with CG. The film used virtual production techniques to pre-visualize the scenes and the camera movements. They used a combination of live-action footage, motion capture data, and virtual environments to create a rough draft of the scenes before the actual film took place. Deep learning and AI models were used to create realistic fur and skin textures of the animals, and volumetric rendering was used to create realistic clouds and fog, which gave a sense of depth and atmosphere in the digital environment. This film was one of the first films to use real-time rendering to create the digital environments. This allowed them to see the results of the changes they made to the scenes in real time, using game engines like Unreal. Jon Favreau, who was the director of this film, used techniques he learned from this film in his later projects, which include the live-action remake of The Lion King and The Mandalorian, which were also visual effect marvels. I love Jon Favreau, his work is just so amazing. Star Wars Rogue One 2016. It was directed by Gareth Edwards, who directed films like The Godzilla. One of the most impressive visual effects in Rogue One was the creation of digital characters. This included the recreation of Grand Moff Tarkin and Princess Leia from the original Star Wars trilogy. To achieve this, the VFX team used a combination of motion capture and digital animation techniques. This involved capturing the performance of an actor on set and then using computer graphics to create a digital character that matched their movement and facial expressions. Another important technique used in Rogue One was photogrammetry. This involves taking photographs of real-world objects and environments from multiple angles and using specialized software to create a 3D model from them. This technique was used to create the film's many detailed ships and props. The team took many 3D scans of the original props used in the first Star Wars film because Rogue One was set just minutes before Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. Virtual reality cameras were used for the director to be able to find different camera angles, especially in the space battles, which were all CG. Nearly 1,700 visual effects shots from ILM are included in Rogue One. 2017's War of the Planet of the Apes is a VFX heavy film. It runs for about 2 hours and 20 minutes, and all but 15 shots of the film has VFX in it. The film is directed by Matt Reeves, who directed the new Batman film, combined with Weta Digital, the studio that made Lord of the Rings movies in New Zealand, and they worked really hard on the VFX of this film. Human hair and animal fur look a lot different, and there are problems in the previous Planet of the Apes films because they had to use human hair systems in those films. The VFX team developed a new fur simulation and shading technology. This involved using complex algorithms to simulate the movement and behavior of individual hairs, resulting in a realistic looking fur that moved and reacted naturally to the environment and the actions of the characters. They also built a new ecosystem generator for the environments to grow trees so that they looked aged, competing for resources, which gave a realistic outlook. Photogrammetry was also used to scan the environment, and which they later created 3D models out of and used like kit bashing to create the massive environments in the film. 2021's Dune was a visual marvel. The film relied heavily on advanced visual effects to create its immersive world, which they won an Oscar for. Even though the film was a VFX heavy film, they shot most of the film outside in real desert environments in natural sunlight, but this made it hard for them to use green screen and blue screen to add set extensions because the light would reflect off of the blue screen or the green screen on the characters, which make it impossible for them to key the background out. So they had to use a specific sand color screen to be able to key the backgrounds out. The wing animations used in the ornithopters were based off of a dragonfly, as you can all see, but they had to create special systems to get the motion blur right because the current system of creating motion blur in render engines wouldn't work at that speed of which these blades were moving, which was 12 times per frame. They also used real helicopters to get reference on how sand would react in the wind, and there were times where they used the footage of the helicopters moving and just replaced it with the ornithopter as well. Ready Player One. This massive VFX heavy film was directed by Steven Spielberg along with ILM doing the VFX work. 60% of the film was held in a virtual space and 40% was in the real world. Although it was the real world, the film was set to be on a dystopian future, so they had to make most of that digitally as well. They shot most of the film in a soundstage, and a lot of motion capture was used to drive the digital characters. The film's many large-scale battle scenes, especially the final battle, which involves hundreds of digital characters with unique costumes and unique props, had to be created. In the end, the team counted about 1,000 unique characters, and the animations of the crowds were created using a special software called Massive. This software allowed the filmmakers to simulate the movement and behavior of large crowds in special ways, making the battle scenes feel more epic and immersive. Avengers Endgame. With a total of around 2,700 VFX shots and around 14 different VFX companies working on this film, Avengers Endgame was a VFX marvel. They used motion capture to create the performance of the Hulk, Thanos, and Rocket. They also used keyframe animations for the shots, although they had the actors doing motion capture. Digital de-aging. This is a technique Marvel has been using in a bunch of their films. It was used in certain shots in Endgame as well to make the actors look younger in flashback scenes. This technique involved manipulating the facial features of the actors and matching them with their younger counterparts. Costume replacement. You must have seen this shot from the Avengers film. But originally, they weren't wearing this suit, they were wearing their own costumes, and the VFX studio created the quantum suits later digitally. You might ask why they would do that. Well, one reason could be this way they would have given more time for the filmmakers to design the suits and not be locked into a specific design. Also, that's what I think. The film also utilized advanced compositing techniques to seamlessly blend huge action set pieces. This involved creating matte paintings and layering the different elements of the scenes together to create a cohesive and realistic battle scene, especially in the final battle. Pirates of the Caribbean. Almost every Marvel film is criticized for having heavy CGI. Although the Pirates of the Caribbean movies aren't. Almost every Pirates of the Caribbean has heavy VFX in them, like the man with octopus tendrils for a beard weren't actually real. This was one of the first movies to incorporate on-set motion capture for characters like Davy Jones and his crew. Almost half of the Pirates of the Caribbean films are set in oceans, so water simulations play a huge role in the film. They created a new software called Flowline to handle most of its complex water simulations like realistic waves, tides, and currents. Another advanced water simulation technique used in the film is the use of the Real Wave software. This software was used to create realistic water surfaces such as waves and splashes created by the boats and sea creatures in the films. Blade Runner 2049. The visual effects in this film was very subtle. In this film, they had characters who appeared in the original Blade Runner film reappearing, so they had to create digital versions of the characters in CG. They did test renders matching the old film with the new CG character, and the director or the studio weren't able to tell the difference between the original and the CG versions, which led them to proceed with this effect. Holograms. The film used advanced projection techniques to create the holograms that appeared in the film. These holograms were created using a combination of practical and digital effects, with the digital effects being used to create the various animations and designs that were projected onto the practical elements of the set. Set extensions. The film extensively used set extension techniques to create dystopian versions of Los Angeles in 2049. The production team filmed on location in various parts of the city and then used digital effects to extend and modify the locations to create a futuristic, decayed version of the city. The Transformers film. Up until this point in time, most films that use VFX try to hide their visual effects in shadows and dark areas as much as possible. It can help create the illusion that they are actually part of the scene and not a digital creation. But in the Transformers, most of the shots were done in daylight, with high exposure to sunlight and reflections. Most of the Transformer robots had reflective material, so that was a huge challenge for the VFX teams at the time. But I think they did a really good job with it. They used HDRIs throughout the film to get the proper lighting values that were present in location to which helped the CG artists to create the characters look real in the post-production. The animation of the film was really well done as well. They made sure the characters didn't grow in scale when they transformed, so they had to make sure every small detail of the Transformer model fit inside when they transform back into a car as well. Also, a lot of the animation looks so good because they use a lot of basic animation principles in the scenes like setup and payoff, squash and stretch, anticipation, everything. 2010's Inception. One of the key tools used in the making of Inception was pre-visualization. Previs for short. Previs is the process of creating rough animated versions of shots using 3D computer graphics software. In Inception, Previs was used extremely to plan and visualize complex sequences, such as the zero gravity fight scene and the city bending scene. By using Previs, the filmmakers were able to plan out the shots and camera movements in advance, saving time and money during the actual filming. In addition to digital effects, Inception also utilized utilized a number of practical effects, which are physical effects created on set rather than in post-production. For example, the rotating hallway sequence was achieved by building a large rotating set that the actors could walk and fight on. The set was then rotated using hydraulic motors, giving the illusion of zero gravity. A lot of CG was used in the film's dream sequence, like the trippy rotating cities, the fight scenes, the dystopian dead city, which seamlessly blend with the real footage, so it's impossible for anyone to tell the difference between the two.